All right, folks, we're going to talk about something today that should be basic but isn't anymore, and that's reading. College kids cannot read, and this is a huge red flag. And no, I don't mean that they're illiterate. I mean that they can't read complex texts, do critical thinking, can't read a whole book in a week, let alone maybe even a whole semester. These things aren't happening anymore. Kids are reading at a much lower reading level than they should be. So we're going to talk about the three main reasons why this is happening, and make sure you stay tuned to the end. I'm going to talk about how we can make sure that our kids don't fall into this trap and what you could do to prevent it. And no, it doesn't mean that you have to homeschool. Hi, my name is Sabrina. I'm the creator of Helpful Little Humans. I help parents foster their children's natural, independent, and helpful desires. Make sure you follow along for more, hit that notification bell, and subscribe to my channel so you're always notified when a new video comes. So how did I get here? I was researching about homeschooling, public schooling, what Trump is trying to do with the DOE, what is going on in America. Are kids really actually struggling with reading? And I came across this book. Yes, obviously on brand. I read a book called Dumbing Us Down by Taylor Gatto, and do not be fooled by how thin this book is. It is dense, and you need to read it slowly. It is at a higher reading level than maybe what most people are used to. I've been reading a lot of fiction. I'll admit it. I like to read young adult fiction, and sometimes I think I need a reminder too that I should be reading at a reading level that's more appropriate maybe for my age. And this is something that I think a lot of us struggle with because we are all so used to social media and fast-paced information that, yes, and I think it's good to read the young adult novels. It's fun to read those things, the fictional books, but sometimes we should challenge our brains. And that is exactly what this book did for me. It really challenged my mindset, and it's just way ahead of his time. He wrote this in the 90s, and one of the things inside this book that he was talking about was a distractor for kids was the television. I mean, could you imagine if he wrote this book now? We have phones, social media, so many other things distracting our children, and just back then it was just the television and how that was actually so detrimental to everyone. But this book, Dumbing Us Down, John is a teacher. He was a teacher of 30 years in the New York City school systems, and not only just a teacher, he won many, many awards, a well-loved teacher. And so a teacher breaks down how the system of schools is actually making everyone dumber. What he argues is that the system of how the schools are set up, how the school day is set up, the curriculum, everything, that is actually working. And not in the way that you think it is. It's actually working for what it was intended to do. The school system, the layout, everything was intended to have kids become obedient members of society. Rather than be designed to educate, it was designed for obedience and challenge kids to not think critically, but just to follow instructions. I would argue that this applies to any sort of school. Public school, private school, any of those are following this system of having kids just become these kind of mindless instruction follow zombies. And I think that kind of sounds silly, but when you read the book and you understand, oh, wait, actually, he's completely right, and we really need to change this. And so he is challenging that we need to change the way that schools are set up and how we are teaching our children. First reason why college kids aren't reading anymore is because he argues that schools don't actually teach kids how to learn. Instead, they teach compliance. Bells tell children when to get up and to move. Creativity, that's squashed. Critical thinking, that's squashed. Because when do you have time to think critically? When do you have time to be creative? You are a number in the classroom of probably way too many kids per the ratio of the teacher. And the subjects that are so compartmentalized that why are we learning like 7 subjects in one day? If you're cut up in such short time periods, how are you ever going to actually dive into anything and actually learn it? He says, we don't need a national curriculum with rigid sequences of instruction. What we need are curricula that produce people who are truly literate and curious. This is so important because he's not arguing that schools, need to just go away. He's arguing that we need to rethink the way that schools are, and he's really challenging us to teach our children to think critically. And I think this is one of the most important lessons you could teach a kid. When I'm homeschooling my child right now, and one of the things that I like to do with him are logic puzzles. And I really think this is so important, and it's going to carry him for the rest of his life, is to think logically and how to critically think about situations, not just for education, but just for life skills. We need to be able to think critically, and these are things that our children are no longer challenged with. So this idea that the bells are really dictating your child's life in school and that they have no time to learn, it comes from his third lesson, and that's an indifference. Listen to this. The third lesson I teach is indifference. I teach children not to care too much about anything, even though they want to make it appear that they do. How I do this is very subtle. I do it by demanding that they become totally involved in my lessons, jumping up and down in their seats with anticipation, competing vigorously with each other for my favor. It's heartwarming when they do that. It impresses everyone, even me. When I'm at my best, I plan lessons very carefully in order to produce this show of enthusiasm. But when the bell rings, I insist they drop whatever it was that we've been doing and proceed quickly to the next workstation. They must turn on and off like a light switch. Nothing important is ever finished in my class, nor in my class I know of. Students never have a complete experience except on the installment plan. Instead, the lesson of bells is that no work is worth finishing, so why care too deeply about anything? Years of bells will condition all but the strongest to a world that can no longer offer important work to do. When I read that, my mind was blown because I imagine myself in school. Like, think about it. When you put yourself, when he's talking about, you're sitting in the classroom and you're just learning, and maybe you get excited about a subject and you're having this finally a good riff with your teacher back and forth, and then boom, bell rings and everyone has to just get up and go. I mean, you have to shut off your brain. And that's so true. And it's not a good lesson for kids' futures, right? In college, you shouldn't then get invested in your work because, we just shut off our brains just like that. And your work in the workplace, you shouldn't get invested in your work because just shut it off like that because it's not important. The bell rings, we just move on. And I think that's where homeschool really succeeds, is because a child learns more if they're interested in it. So if your child is really interested in the subject that you're learning, then if you're at home, you could just continue to riff and talk about it and bounce ideas back and forth and maybe go outside and look at that or whatever it is and really dive into that subject, and your child become almost an expert in it because they are so interested in it. Versus in school, you have to do whatever the teacher is telling you to learn about, which may or may not even interest your child. And if they are interested in it, now they have to turn off their brains as soon as the bell rings. So why be interested in anything if the only important thing is just to keep moving on, keep your life moving on? We just need to keep going forward to make it to the end of the day. And I think that's so many of our mentality. We just want to get to the end of the day, right? Whether it's in work or just during your day, I just want to make it to the end and the series of bells or checkpoints or whatever it is. And none of us can slow down because of it. Okay, so the second biggest problem why college kids can't read anymore is because we turned the way we were teaching kids to read, we turned that on its head. We used to teach them phonics. Now we are teaching whole language learning, which is just the idea of learning sight words. And then you're going to be able to recognize those sight words and just kind of piece it together. We're no longer teaching kids how to sound out the letters, how to learn phonics. Don't you remember, like in the 90s, the commercial would even come up for, what was it? I don't know, Hooked on Phonics?
Learn to read with Hooked on Phonics, the musical reading program.
Hooked on Phonics works for me.
Call 1-800-ABCDEFG.
I mean, this was everyone. We all learned phonics, and for some reason we're not teaching kids that anymore. I think there was this like kind of romantic idea that kids will naturally learn how to read and they'll be able to just recognize the words and it'll just come so seamless. And yes, I'm sure COVID was also to blame because of this. When kids were home and isolated and not learning, they were learning on a screen and all this. But the idea that phonics has to be completely abolished has backfired because kids can't read anymore. And this actually was a huge ordeal. It became known as the reading wars, and all the states were always fighting about what we should be teaching. And a lot of states have changed their ways and started teaching phonics, and they're seeing results of kids learning to read again because they are back to the phonics method. And I think this is important because our children became dependent on guessing. We are just guessing through the whole passage because we're just looking at words. Oh, that looks like something else. We're just guessing, right? And I think what no one's really touching on is, why did we go this route? It wasn't because of the romantic idea that kids will just learn to read naturally. I think that maybe sold it on some people, but I think it was more pushed because it was a faster way to teach kids to read. If you think about it, if I just teach them a couple sight words and then they're going to start reading naturally, I don't have to spend as much time and we can continue and just move faster through our lessons and through our day. Again, everything in our society is go, go, go. So let's also speed up the way we teach kids how to learn to read. But phonics takes time. You have to learn the letter sounds and break it down. And just, it takes a lot more time, a lot more effort. And I want to also make it clear, I'm not blaming the teachers. The teachers are doing what they're told. They're teaching the curriculum that they're told to do. He, in his book, he is also not blaming the teachers because he is one of them. This is the job that they were supposed to do, and it is not their fault. The system is flawed, and that is what is to blame. And I really think that phonics was just a slower way of learning. and it was too slow for our new fast-paced society that is just constantly getting faster and faster. And not only were we not even teaching phonics, we were teaching the sight words, but we are also still teaching kids to read way too early. We're teaching kids to read in preschool, some places, definitely in kindergarten, your child is able to read, but this has been proven all over the world that children don't need to start reading until the age of 6. And actually, when they start reading at a later time, at age 6 or later, they maybe in the beginning, in their reading level will be a little bit lower than someone who learned to read earlier. However, their reading level will continue to grow and surpass those students who have learned to read earlier because of many different factors, but one of them is just mainly interest. They are more naturally to want to continue to read and to grow in their learning because they waited and they had those years where they weren't using that part of their brain yet. They didn't have to tap into that muscle and learn how to read. They were just having fun. And I think that is important too. That's to our third point, and that is that our college kids can't read anymore because they are so used to reading just snippets of information. And this is from being on social media, the cell phone, iPad, tablet, whatever it is that you are just skimming through and reading short articles. But also in school, you are also only required to read short articles. That is through standardized testing. You only have to read a short part of the book and just immediately critically think on that. Or maybe even during your English class, you're only reading parts of books. We're no longer reading good literature. We're no longer taking our time to read novels. We're no longer doing that in school. And again, it's because our society is just rushing everything. So why not rush that too? And think about it. We are teaching kids to be in society right now because our brains work like that. This is how we work. We read short articles on the web. We are constantly reading all day. If you were on social media, you were constantly reading all day. But are you actually diving into anything and really thinking critically and learning and researching? I don't think so. You're probably just reading little snippets. And this is a problem that we all struggle with. And I'm to blame for this too. I have my phone. I'm addicted to my phone. I didn't even grow up with a phone. So could you imagine kids who are growing up with phones, how addicted they are, how much they're just reading these short little things and not really ever diving into it. The average reading level of a college freshman is below 7th grade. That's really scary. That's really scary. And I just want to pause here for a second. How many times during this video did you scroll down to the comments, or any video, whenever you watch a video on YouTube, do you scroll through the comments? Do you pick up your cell phone? Are you scrolling as you're listening to the YouTube video, or, or are you multitasking in a way that you need to distract your brain, use your hands, do something else instead of just solely focusing on the video? I'm guilty of this too. I watch videos and immediately I'm also reading through the comments, and it's just, this is what we do. And even Netflix is starting to create their shows for this mindset where the shows that you're watching are actually thought of with the viewer in mind, sitting there on their phone scrolling. Okay, Sabrina, so what is the solution? What am I to do? What should I do with my child to make sure that they are able to read when they get to college at a really good reading level? And like I said in the beginning of the video, it doesn't mean that you have to homeschool, though he does argue in the book that homeschooling is one of the better choices because you're able to really engage with your child. They're able to really bond with the family and have this good quality time aside from the education part. If you can homeschool, you really should, because that is going to be the best method for right now, because honestly, the whole system needs to get revamped. So until then, homeschooling really is the best option. Really. But if you cannot homeschool, at least supplement learning outside of school. And this can be done with just at nighttime, engage your children by reading books aloud to them. Doesn't matter. Start at a very, very young age. Read novels. Read at a higher reading level to them. You can read aloud. When your kids are older, you can do novels together and read aloud to them. Just engage your children through books. Read together as a family. Build this culture instead of your family sitting around the table with phones out. Have everyone have a book out. Start reading together as a family. And then he argues that the best learning happens outside of school, not because of the education, but also just from learning from each other. Engage your neighbors, engage your extended family, learn from each other, learn how to work with your hands with your children. This can be done not just in homeschooling, but you could do this on the weekends or at night. And try not to overload your children with too many extracurriculars so that way you can spend these moments together as a family learning and growing together as a family. And I think one of the main things that we need to do is challenge ourselves first. If you are addicted to your phone and you are always constantly glued to it, then what are we expecting our children to do? You need to stop. You need to put down your phone, pick up a book, educate yourself, and educate your children. Take the power back into the family. And this will make our kids smarter and will make our kids want to continue to learn if we are all learning alongside them. So if you want to break from the system, I suggest with this book, starting with this book right here, Dumbing Us Down. It was incredible. Let me know in the comments below, do you think school is failing our kids on purpose? And what do you think we should be doing to prevent this from happening?